Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today we're talking about a new movement taking place in the relationship of Pakistan and Afghanistan. Once again, both the countries have pledged to make a fresh start in relations. Hopefully we'll see that this will be the right way and it will eventually achieve the goal that both countries are pledging to achieve. We hope that it's a good start. Once again, Pakistan has always reiterated its support for an Afghan-owned, Afghan-led reconciliation process. We'll be talking about that in detail. Our second topic, as unfortunately, has to do with the thousands of people who have attended the funerals of over 60 Palestinians massacred in Gaza by Israel. Of course, condemnation coming from across the globe, except for the US and a few other countries that are supporting Israel. Very unfortunate state of affairs in the world, and the collective conscience of the world seems to have died when it comes to Israel. Let's get the conversation started. I'd like to introduce our guests in the studio. Joining me for the conversation today, first of all, we have Khurram Iqbal with us, and joining him, we have Qamar Cheema. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. Khurram Sahab, I'll start with you. As we were talking earlier before the beginning of the program, we've heard this statement, pledges being made to improve our relations, Afghanistan and Pakistan. They even have a working group now, the APPS. But every time we hear about these intentions, good intentions of starting afresh with a clean slate, there are issues that crop up and we go back to square one. So do you think that this time is different, Khurram? What can we expect?
I think this time it's a little different because the momentum that we have gained due to such visits and exchange, it's likely to sustain for some time to come, because as we have just discussed, that once Afghanistan and Pakistan started interacting increasingly on different forums other than security, there is some positive movement of development. For example, the frequency of blame game is not as it was perhaps last year. Both countries are suffering from the incidents of terrorism, but they refrain from blaming each other as they did a few years ago. So that's a positive omen. But that does not mean that on counter-terrorism front we are not genuinely discussing the issue. We are not exchanging the views on in a frank manner. We are certainly doing that with Afghanistan, but that is not being done in a public discourse.
Right.
And I think in our intelligentsia, our media must be very selective about the topics that we bring to the public discourse. If we are discussing the issue of Afghan involvement in supporting non-state actors in Pakistan, that is not something that should be done in the public or private TV channels. So there are a lot of positive developments. What we have seen between the two countries, that not one but 5 different working groups have been established between Pakistan and Afghanistan, ranging from counter-terrorism to enhance economic development and enhanced connectivity between the two countries.
That's a very crucial aspect of our relationship. Going forward, Cheema Sahab, when we talk about taking a fresh start and bridging existing gaps that exist in the relationship, taking collective actions for our mutual benefit, and most importantly, trust between the countries has to be maintained. Now, do you think that we're moving in that direction and we'll be able to achieve our goals collectively, especially when it comes to economic cooperation, which Mr. Ashraf Ghani has also spoken about?
Well, definitely, I think since Prime Minister Abbasi visited Afghanistan in April, and since now there have been certain improvement, and as Dr. was also mentioning, there's some 6 working groups have been established, and they are a part of the security. You know, I also have certain discussions here with the Afghans, and they were like they were thinking that things are moving in the right direction because we want to think something other than security. That is a dilemma in the relationship between both the countries, and I think that is our regional dilemma as well. We are always engaged in security domain. All we have to move forward is we need to move to other areas, because every country, you know, if all the elements of power are seen, there are other elements of power that needs to be utilized as a state, and that is where the world can look towards us. So I think that is very much encouraging. there was a dialogue among the trilateral dialogue among the ulamas of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Indonesia in Bogor, Indonesia, and there has come a verdict out of that, and that is the suicide bombing in Tehran. And before that, Pakistan came up with this idea of Pegam-e-Pakistan. More than 1,800 ulamas from Pakistan came up with this idea of to declare that suicide bombing is haram incident, haram. So I think both countries are moving in right direction, but still mistrust is there. I think this Pakistan-Afghanistan ulama should sit together rather going in Indonesia and getting their support. That is also some sort of, I may say that there is a lack of confidence. It should have been a more regional approach rather going to the other countries and asking for more favor. But definitely, I think what matters is that looking at Pakistan's situation with Afghanistan and looking how much closer we are, I think we don't have any choice but to cooperate and engage and to move forward. So I think we need to encourage all this, and the elections are coming in Afghanistan, and we need to support the Afghan electioning process, and we need to support the democracy there. We need to support the institutions there. But I think they also have to understand our sensitivities and looking at the toned down style of both the countries and the way they are, this Pakistan-Afghanistan peace and action plan is moving on. Recently there was on 14th May, Afghan officials were here. They had meetings with the Pakistan's national security advisor, and things are moving forward, inching ahead. So I think that is a nice initiative, and that must be appreciated. And that and the narrative on this must come on media as well, so that one could see that things are improving. On the other way, we're looking at Pakistan's relation with the United States are soaring, or we are not on the right track. So I think getting closer with Afghanistan in any way is important for us, and Pakistan supports all that initiative. But I think Afghanistan also need to address our concerns wherever we have.
Very important point you raised about addressing Pakistan's concerns, because that is a contentious issue. Out of the new framework that we're talking about, 7 principles have been elucidated. First of all, undertaking effective actions against fugitives, irreconcilable elements posing a security issue to both countries. Also, the denial of the use of territory by any for any network, group or individual for anti-state activities against the other country, joint supervision and coordination and confirmation of violations of each other's territory would be avoided, and we already spoke about the public. So there are a number of these steps that they want to take in the new framework. Why were they not taken previously?
I think there have been efforts from Pakistan to address these concerns. Interestingly, all these 7 points, they relate to effective border management.
Absolutely.
If our borders are managed effectively, most of these issues would be addressed, whether it's the issue of fugitives or the cross-border movement of terrorists. Afghan side has traditionally invoked the disputed nature of border between the two countries, but Pakistan has insisted that the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan is an internationally recognized border, and there's simply no dispute whatsoever. I think from Afghan side there is some sort of an understanding being developed on this issue, because unless the border between the two countries is managed, you cannot really have a peaceful Afghanistan or a peaceful Pakistan, because historically what we have witnessed in the both countries, you start military operations on this side of the border, and then militants taking advantage of the porous border, they move on to the other side. Similar things happen in case of Afghanistan. As you did an operation against them since 2001, they would then move to the tribal areas of Pakistan. So now Afghan side must appreciate this complexity, that effective border management is in the interest of both countries, not only for the security, but for the economic interactions as well. Because as formal, if we can have formal economic interactions with Afghanistan, that would benefit both the countries, because at the moment the volume of informal trade between the two countries is pretty high. If you are able to bring that informal trade into mainstream, you can really take the maximum advantage of a porous but a very well managed and effective border.
I think that's very important. When we talk about the progress that has been made in addressing the relationship of Afghanistan and Pakistan, one of the things that the leaders on both sides have talked about are the gaps that exist in the relationship, and talk about covering those gaps. So if you could just highlight what those gaps, in your opinion, are that need to be plugged?
Well, I think first of all, the mistrust is there, and that mistrust is lying, and I think both the leadership want to end that mistrust at all levels. Second, I think what I feel both the leadership might have discussed that there needs to be more engagement among the political forces between both the countries. The engagement or the relationship between between both the countries, dominantly that has been heavily is on the security domain. So I think till the time the political leadership or the people-to-people contact are not in a more formal way, for example, as Dr. Saab was mentioning, so if how far we bring the informal economy to the formal economy, so if the people-to-people contacts is channelized and there is a mistrust, because at the moment Pakistan believes that having this porous border and border that is not being managed properly, this people-to-people contacts has also been damaged, and the business community is really disturbed from both sides, and people are disturbed here. So I think they want to end this mistrust, and for that they might have discussed about this role of the political leadership and the role of bureaucracy as well. The civilian bureaucracy need to enhance, and that is where I think the political side of the apparatuses of both the countries, they need to engage, because we have seen that since last 15-17 years it's about the security thing. So until and unless this security political side and then media cooperation, that needs to be enhanced, because much of the narrative that is coming from both sides is coming from the media outlets, and how both the countries manage the narrative that is coming from both sides, that is important. Looking at how the Afghan media is portraying Pakistan's position in Afghanistan, very much important. Pakistani media does not have its presence in Afghanistan. This is very alarming.
Well, not just Afghanistan, but anywhere else in the world. Let's not talk about Pakistani media presence.
Definitely.
That's a sour point.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I think these are the areas, I think, if Pakistan's information ministry, if all the stakeholders in the setup, they need to work together, and they have to help the other stakeholders to achieve all the objectives. So it's not. I think the discourses have been heavily dominated by the security arena, security areas. So I think if we do not move from here to other areas, things are not going to get settled. I think whatever what is happening here, all these 6 points which have been mentioned with the action plan between Pakistan and Afghanistan, it has been certain other things as well. And I really foresee that in future, the political government that has strong, deep roots and is elected and legitimate government in Pakistan, they need to take actually the charge of its foreign policy areas, where it feels that we need to be more active and we need to be more engaging with the neighboring countries other than Afghanistan. So Prime Minister, while going anywhere or going in Afghanistan, should also have its own perspective, or should also have his own vision of making things right, so that the parliament's legitimacy and parliament's upper hand on the national narrative is seen.
Right, and let's also talk about Mr. Hikmat Karzai's statement when he was interacting with General Janjua. Very important point he raised, and that was to separate economics from politics, and economic cooperation is the key for improving Pakistan and Afghanistan's bilateral relationship. We should rise above political impediments and focus on the economic aspect. How important is this particular observation by Mr. Hikmat Karzai, and how can we really put it into practice?
This is pretty significant, but this is not unprecedented. In the past, Pakistan has made such statements and tried to convince the Afghan side that we should keep politics and economics separately. I still vividly remember Engineer Khurram when he was the Minister of Commerce, in one of the conference that was held in National Defense University. He was of the firm view that we should engage with Afghanistan on economic front without expecting the level of reciprocity, because when we expect reciprocity from Afghanistan, we may be ignoring the harsh ground realities that exist in Afghanistan, the limitations of the Afghan government. So this has been there for a long time. Pakistan has tried to convince Afghans, but this issue was raised from the Afghan side. They always insisted that for us, the matter of top priority is security, because we are suffering from number of terrorist attacks on daily basis, and unless our security issues are resolved, we are not going to engage with you on economic front. That is one reason that Afghanistan initially was enthusiastic about joining CPAC, but gradually they lost that enthusiasm because they perhaps thought that it is important to first sort out the security issues with Pakistan. Now, what Hikmat Khalil Karzai has said, I think this is a paradigm shift from the Afghan side, and this is a very positive, I would say, indication from Kabul that Pakistan must tap into, because once we move on low politics area, it would lead to an environment that will be quite conducive for having meaningful dialogue on high politics areas such as security, sovereignty, and terrorism.
Well, we've also been joined by Hassan Khan, journalist. Thank you very much, Hassan Khan sir, for joining us. So we're talking about Pakistan and Afghanistan's improving relations. When we talk about the situation in Afghanistan, one of the interesting things that President Ghani has recently said is about bringing the Taliban on board without any preconditions, unconditional talks with the Taliban he's offered time and time again. Are there any hopes that we might be seeing unconditional talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government take place? Can Pakistan be a facilitator in that process?
I think if we read the Pakistan's policy as Pakistan involvement in whether it was in the quadrilateral contact group process or whether it was in the Heart of Asia or the other processes simultaneously going on in Afghanistan for peace, bringing peace in Afghanistan. Pakistan's only, I think, mostly Pakistan demand was that the talks shall be not conditions with any party. I think it was the same philosophy, if you remember Hillary Clinton when she was the Secretary of State. They talk, fight, or fight, talk policy. It is on the same pattern that let them first join us without putting any condition. And I think Ashraf Ghani hasn't stated that out of the blue. When it was in the Kabul KP2, Kabul process 2, on 28th of February, when he announced that we are ready to go for unconditional engagement with the Taliban. And I think that was a positive step because the whole of the pressures been shifted toward the Taliban. So far, they haven't responded openly, freely. But I think a lot of water has flown under the bridge since then. Pakistan is actively engaged with Afghan, and I think you are observing. Definitely, everybody is observing that the temperature between the two countries has gone down. The rhetorics are now no more there. Yesterday there was an attack in Farah districts on the western it is the western part of Afghanistan, where instead of accusing Pakistan, which was a historical sandbag for all the Afghans and the international community, they this time says that it is the Iran which is supporting. And this was the Pakistan. Usually Pakistan was trying to convince the world that look, it's not Pakistan which has a if there is any proxy. Every country, Iran has its own proxy, the US has its own proxy, the Indian have, but unfortunately everybody was just bashing Pakistan. So I think there is a lot of realization on both sides of the border. Pakistan, as my friend has stated, that Pakistan is ready to go extra mile as for sitting with Afghan or helping the Afghan in bringing peace. And the same, I think, Afghans, you see, the last 2-3 months, especially the since January, February, and March, and even the current month, we saw some deadly terrorist attack in various parts of the country. But fortunately, Afghans, instead of just accusing Pakistan or blaming Pakistan for it, they may have communicated, and there were also attack on the border checkpost on the Pakistani side by the Afghan military. But like the historical hue and cry, I think both are talking on table, and there is no more megaphone diplomacy between the two countries. These are the positive thing, and I see that a lot is going on. The day before, yesterday, Hikmat Karzai, he was the same person. When last time he visited in Islamabad, and at the end of talks, he said nothing come out of the talks. And but this time, look at his statement. His statement was more promising, progressive, and diplomatically and all politically correct statement that we discuss peace, we discuss all issues between the two countries, and definitely progress will be made, and we will continue talking on these issues. So I think these are the positive things going on, and hope if this is the pace of engagement. So very soon, I'm pretty confident that both the countries will have not only normal, good friendly relations.
Well, let's hope for the best. Thank you very much, Hassan Khan Sahab, for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. Now, coming back into the studio, sir, I want to take that a little further and talk about Mr. Ashraf Ghani's intentions, which he has elaborated. He also hinted on bringing the necessary amendments in the country's constitution to accommodate Taliban's concerns. He went further and offered the insurgents, the Taliban, to open a political office. And he also promised to release prisoners, remove sanctions against Taliban who are interested in peace talks. So how do you view all these developments?
With regards to Afghan Taliban,
because we've heard it all before, by the way.
We have got two options, both for Afghanistan and the international community. Either you eliminate them militarily or you co-opt them. Elimination part has been tested time and again since 2001, but that has not worked.
It's
even
failed.
with thousands of American forces, with all their military muscle present in Afghanistan. So the second option is co-opting Afghan Taliban. At the moment, number of regional and international players are co-opting Afghanistan because of the arrival of Daesh. Because Daesh has dramatically transformed the threat landscape of this region. Daesh is transnational, Afghan Taliban are not. Daesh is targeting the sectarian fault lines in Afghanistan. Afghan Taliban have never done that. So in essence, Afghan Taliban for last 16 years have projected themselves as a nationalist struggle whose agenda does not extend beyond Afghanistan, and they have proved that from their actions. And now Afghan Taliban are being projected by a number of forces in this region as the most effective counterweight to stop the expansion of Daesh in this region. Because if there is one force which can effectively fight Daesh, that is Afghan Taliban. So keeping that in mind, Iran has also co-opted Afghan Taliban. Russia is also talking to Afghan Taliban. So if Chinese and Pakistan has been a long time extending its diplomatic support to Afghan Taliban. So what we can do is to Afghan government in Kabul, if the regional countries are comfortable talking to Afghan Taliban to come up with a solution which is mutually acceptable for the Kabul government and Afghan Taliban, we should not discard that as something which is not possible.
We should actively work to promote that.
Exactly, because military elimination of Afghan Taliban has not worked. And experimenting the same thing with different results, that is something we may term as silliness.
But the most important thing is Mr. Ashraf Ghani's statement regarding Pakistan, saying that we are ready to restart talks about peace with Pakistan again and to forget the bitter experiences of the past and start a new chapter. That's a very, very good intention voiced by the Afghan president, but we've heard it all before.
Well, I think definitely the political leadership need to reiterate such kind of statements and such kind of intentions time and again. This is what we expect from them. But I think at the same time, we need to look at that if they really want to change the Afghan constitution, that is an encouraging step because they have to have the Taliban inside the setup. If they don't have the Taliban inside the setup and they don't have the capability as well to fight and to compete with them, then definitely there is no point. If the FARC rebels could be mainstreamed in Colombia, if the Indians are talking about mainstreaming the Afghan youth because they believe, although they are coming up with the atrocities against them, and it has happened everywhere, even in South Africa, in Ireland. I think that needs to be accepted, that the time has come that we need to engage, they need to engage with the Taliban and they need to give them the share of the power. And I think till the time they resist the share of power and they don't have the capability domestically and they need the external support for maintaining their stability, I think that is not going to work. They are just, they have tried every other option and they have realized, and with this rise of Islamic State in Afghanistan and every other attack that is mostly sectarian in nature in Afghanistan, that is coming from Islamic State, and Iranians are disturbed, the Russians are disturbed, and Pakistan-Russia cooperation is very much on these lines that we have to look at the rise of Islamic State and we have have to deal with mechanism. We have to craft a mechanism to deal with the Islamic State. So sort of a regional approach is emerging for Islamic State. So I think the effectiveness and the utility of the Taliban has increased in Afghanistan. And looking at that particular lens, the Afghan government actually believes that till the time if there are multiple non-state actors rising, and we do not engage those who have been earlier and those who are the local ones. For instance, Taliban are the local ones. Also, IS there are certain local people, but they have the external input there. So I think the Afghan government realizes the utility of Afghan Taliban could be there, and Iranians want the same, the Russians want the same, Pakistan wants the same. So I think there needs to be regional consensus for that. So I think that is very much encouraging, and we should respect his opinion, and we also believe that they should be steadfast on that, and they should not bear any external pressure in case they have to keep forward, they have to move forward on this particular idea he has mentioned.
All right, we're going to take a short break over here. When we return, we'll continue with our conversation. So just take a short break. We'll be right back.
Trees are beautiful, like a true friend.
Welcome back after the break. We're in conversation with Mr. Khurram Iqbal and Qamar Cheema Saab regarding Pakistan and Afghanistan's changing relationship, and hopefully for the better. Another interesting statement by Mr. Ashraf Ghani was to a US diplomat. He turned around and told the US diplomat that Taliban are very much a part and parcel of the social fabric of Afghanistan. So therefore, any accusations against Taliban for being solely terrorists is also something which is not palatable to the Afghan people. A very interesting statement by the Afghan president. Furthermore, the suggestion or the advice that Pakistan has been giving Afghanistan is to create incentives for the Taliban to join the peace movement in Afghanistan. So how can the Afghan government incentivize the Afghan Taliban? What can the incentives be for them? Khurram Saab, if you'd like to answer that.
Whether Afghan Taliban have responded positively, they have not yet, because they don't see any incentive.
Well, on Monday they said that they're willing to talk to the US.
That's been their stated position for last 15 years, because they are under the impression that they are winning the war in the battlefield, and the victor does not speak to the one who has been vanquished. So at the moment, to be very realist, Afghan Taliban see no incentive to engage in discussion with Afghan government. But that is something which cannot break this deadlock in Afghanistan. To break this deadlock, this is very important for these regional countries, including Pakistan, China, Russia, Turkey, and Iran, to basically motivate Afghan Taliban to get into a dialogue with the Afghan government, because unless there is a dialogue between the two sides, we cannot have a peaceful and stable Afghanistan. And with this mindset, Pakistan has repeatedly tried in the past to convince Afghan Taliban to talk to the Kabul administration, but despite all the pressure that we have exerted on Afghan Taliban, despite the minimum leverage that we have over them, we have not been able to convince Afghan Taliban to sit on the negotiation table with them. There was one such occasion in Murray.
Two, actually, sir. There was a time when Mullah Omar was also ready to talk to the Afghan government, but then he died. And then Mullah Mansour was murdered in order to prevent this from happening.
And both efforts were sabotaged. So there have been a number of spoilers in this all game. So we need to be conscious of the spoilers. And if there is one way for peace and stability in Afghanistan, that is a purely regional solution to Afghanistan, because there are a number of extra regional powers in Afghanistan.
Yes, but that begs the question that the US refusal to engage with the Afghan Taliban and their insistence that they must engage with the Afghan government first, why is that such an anathema to the Afghan Taliban?
I would like to add something, and then I can talk to Mr. Qamar Cheema.
Please.
United States of America is fighting an insurgency thousands of miles away from its homeland. So whatever blunder it commits in Afghanistan, the fallout will only be limited to either Afghanistan or the region. So that's why Americans can afford to commit strategic blunders in Afghanistan and Iraq, but we cannot. So this is what Afghanistan must understand, that we cannot afford to basically accommodate or give undue space to extra regional powers in Afghanistan, because this has been tried time and again and it has failed. There is one solution to Afghanistan, and that is the regional solution.
And therefore, I ask that what is the problem with the Afghan Taliban in engaging with the Afghan government? Because as you just have said, that it is about the region itself, and not the Americans are not that important. If the Afghan Taliban and the Afghan government are able to sit together on the negotiating table, it would then give less of an excuse for the Americans to stay in Afghanistan. So it would actually be beneficial for the Afghans overall, whether Taliban or the government, to actually engage in talks. It's a mutually beneficial thing. I don't understand why the reluctance to engage with each other is still on the ground. Cheema Saab?
Khan Saab, I believe that the Americans have been dealing with the Taliban. It's not that they're not dealing. For example, their office in Qatar is one way, the way they're dealing. Second, I think when they say that it is the Afghan government that needs to deal with the Taliban, that is sort of more of a political statement, because they know that that is Afghan-led, Afghan-owned peace process. So in that context, they're speaking that the Afghan government is leading, and that is where the Ashraf Ghani says that they belong to the social fabric of the society. But I think the Afghan government has realized it's much later that they are a part of the social fabric of the state. They have realized, they must have realized it much earlier. I think, in my personal understanding, the Afghan leadership is not that much serious in terms, or they do not own the country the way they should have owned. All these people have lived abroad for years, for decades, and they have worked in the development of the international community. But the pain that should come for that, the pain that should feel them, the pain that should happen to the people, that needs to be, all these leadership have been imported, or they have been the top installed, and they don't share the burden the way they looking at the pain the people are, just look at those people who are registering themselves into the Afghan identity for voting roles, and they are killed and they're martyred, and then they again go into they stand in the line, and they want the political setup or the democratic setup in the country to be better. I think we need to salute all these people who believe in the institutions of the country. I think that needs to come from the top leadership of the Afghanistan, that there is no other way than to accommodate the Afghan Taliban into the political apparatus. They have lost everything, I think, and there is a big cake. I have given this example time and again. They all have to eat this cake together. One segment, the other, or the third. If the butcher of the Kabul could be the part of the process, then why not the others? This is not that we are against the Taliban, or they have committed so many wrongs. But I think looking at the situation, we don't have any opportunity. It is Pakistan which has eliminated the entire network of the non-state actors. If someone can go and do it. We claim the sovereignty of this country. We put the flag on every place where that was taken over by the non-state actors, and that was because of our own failures that
which we allowed.
Which we allowed definitely for some time, but there was reasons for that. So I think the way Pakistan has done that, the Afghans can't do it. So if you can't do it, let them share the cake.
All right. Let's also talk about the concerns that Pakistan has shown the Afghan government. Earlier on, when we had overtures being made between the Afghan government and the Taliban to engage in peace talks, there were saboteurs on the Afghan government side. The Taliban and the Pakistanis also have had bad experiences when dealing with the Afghan government in trying to go forward on the path of peace. Unfortunately, do you think that that mindset would have changed, and there is more seriousness when it comes to dealing with bringing peace to Afghanistan?
Perhaps there's more seriousness on the top level, including President Ashraf Ghani, Hikmat Khalil Karzai, and some of the other top Afghan leaders. But then the second tier Afghan leadership, whether they are genuinely sincere to have a meaningful dialogue with Pakistan, that remains to be seen. And that is mainly because of their financial lifeline that emanates from New Delhi or Washington. Until Afghanistan has learned to diversify its financial resources, I don't think Afghans can meaningfully engage with the regional partners.
Let's hope that trust, which is missing all around, is able to be restored. We are very hopeful that that process takes place. Let's also talk about the American presence in Afghanistan. The insistence of the Taliban to talk to the Americans it doesn't instill much confidence in the peace process, because as you've seen recently, North Korea has also shown a reluctance, or they seem to have changed their mind in negotiating with the US, especially after the US pulled the Jerusalem stunt of moving their embassy there. How is that going to be affecting the perception of the people of this part of the world again towards the Americans and their motives and their designs?
This question must be posed to the Americans. Why are they reluctant to hold dialogue with Afghan Taliban? This was the policy of George W. Bush Jr., stated policy, no dialogue with the terrorists. But there were some alterations and modifications under President Obama. He was quite open to the possibility of having a dialogue with Afghan Taliban. Under President Trump, if you look at his election campaign, he was all in favor of a dialogue to resolve Afghan problem. But once he assumed office, he took a U-turn on his Afghan position, refused to have any dialogue with Afghan Taliban. He's relying heavily on the use of military force, which has not worked in the past. So I think Americans must be convinced by whosoever has a stake in Afghanistan to engage Afghan Taliban, because there is a new threat emerging from Afghanistan that is equally threatening for the United States of America as well. As I have stated, Afghan Taliban, they are a nationalist militant struggle, unlike Daesh, which is a transnational terrorist organization, which has the will and capacity to conduct attacks beyond Afghanistan, in Europe, in the United States of America. So if there is a meaningful fight and battle is to be waged against Daesh, Americans will have to take Afghanistan and Afghan Taliban on board.
Very well said, Khurram Sahab. I hope that that realization sinks in the right quarters. Thank you very much for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. Well, you heard the conversation, and as always, we urge our viewers to draw their own conclusions from what they've heard. But before we end the program, we would also like to share the silver lining that has emerged in our local news. The Punjab government has taken an initiative, Women on Wheels, and have subsidized motorbikes for women and given them training across many cities in Punjab. And we would like to see women come out and reclaim their public spaces, because they are as much equal citizens of Pakistan as any man is. So therefore, we want to see equality for Pakistani citizens, whether they are men or women. That should not matter at all. And with that hope and on that note, it's goodbye.